Okay, so now we're getting into video 4, which is operant conditioning. The reading is covered on pages 228 to 241. Operant conditioning is also associative learning. It is learning that is based on rewards. Okay, so they're rewarding the dog, and also we have a picture of our man there as a punishment. Okay, so operant conditioning is associative type of learning, okay, where you pair two things together. The person that's responsible for this type of learning is B.F. Skinner. Okay, operant conditioning is when organisms associate their own actions with consequences. Actions followed by reinforcers increase, and those followed by punishers decrease. Okay, so if you are rewarded every single time you do your homework, you're given points, you're going to increase to do your homework. However, if you are punished every single time that you're late, you're probably going to stop being late. Behaviors that operate on the environment to produce rewards or punishing stimuli are called operant behavior. Okay, so the law of effect. Okay, operant conditioning, before it was known as operant conditioning, the first person that kind of explored this type of learning was Edward Thorndike, and he came up with the law of effect. He looked at cats in cages, and he studied cats. If cats were able to escape from the box, they were rewarded. Okay, so a cat in the puzzle box in 1898 used a fish reward to entice cats to find their way out of the puzzle box, like the one above. Through a series of maneuvers, the cat's performance tended to improve with successive trials. Okay, illustrating Thorndike's law of effect. All right, so the more and more they were able to find their way out, the more rewards they would get, which increased their behavior. And this became his law known as the law of effect. Okay, the law of effect is when behavior changes because of consequences or rewards or strengthen the behavior. Okay, the law of effect was known as Edward Thorndike's. The principle that behaviors are followed by favorable consequences become more likely, and the behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences become less likely. It is one of the few laws in psychology, so make sure you know what the law of effect is. Okay, and there's a picture of Edward Thorndike. Okay, next who came about was B.F. Skinner. He was born in 1904 to 1990. He was a college English major and an inspiring writer. Seeking a new direction, he entered graduate school in psychology. He went on to become a modern behaviorism's most influential and controversial figure. Skinner worked elaborating psychologist Edward L. Thorndike's principle of the law of effect, so he kind of went on to expand the law. He found that rewarded behavior is more likely to reoccur. Using Thorndike's law of effect as a starting point, Skinner developed a behavioral technology that revealed principles of behavioral control. These principles also enabled him to teach pigeons such as unpigeon-like behaviors as walking in figure 8, playing ping pong, and keeping a missile on course by pecking a screen or target. Okay, so he used a pigeon, and he was able to teach pigeons to do certain behaviors that ordinarily pigeons wouldn't do. So I always think of, when you're thinking about operant conditioning, you could teach a dog to give you its paw. Every single time it kind of raises its paw, you give them a cookie. Soon enough, okay, it's going to, every time it wants a cookie, it's going to raise its paw. Okay, you're teaching it because of a reward. Okay, so B.F. Skinner was a college English major and inspiring writer. He entered grad school to study psychology. He elaborated on the work of Edward L. Thorndike. He is a nurture guy through and through. Okay, and he's a behaviorist. He kind of believes in the blank slate, and everything you learn is through an experience. Okay, and he is responsible for operant conditioning. So there isn't a spot for B.F. Skinner on your page. Make sure you have this in your notes. Okay, he used the Skinner box or the operant conditioning chamber to improve his concept. Okay, so what was the operant chamber? For his pioneering studies, Skinner designed an operant chamber, popularly known as the Skinner box. The box was a bar or key that an animal presses or pecks to release a reward, food, or water, and a device that records these responses. Operant conditioning experiments have done far more to teach us how to pull habits out of a rat. They have explored the precise conditions that foster efficient and enduring learning. So what would happen is every time the little mouse would hit that lever, a pellet would come down. Soon, okay, it knew to hit the lever, and then pellets would come down. He used shaping at first to train this behavior. In his experiments, Skinner used shaping, a procedure in which reinforcers such as food gradually guide animals' action towards the desired behavior. Okay? It takes steps to get them to complete the desired behavior. So it's step by step by step. Okay? If I wanted you to stand on a chair in my class and do the YMCA, okay, I could shape your behavior without even telling you what you were going to do. Okay? So let's say that you move closer to the chair. I'd give you a piece of candy. You moved away from the chair, I wouldn't give you anything. You move back towards the chair, I'd give you a piece of candy. Okay. Eventually, you sit in the chair, I give you a piece of candy. Okay, you move away from the chair, I don't give you anything. You go back towards the chair, I give you a piece of candy. Eventually, you put your foot up on the chair, I give you 2 pieces of candy. Okay, you eventually put your arms in the air, I give you 3 pieces of candy. I'm gradually shaping your behavior, okay, to do eventually the YMCA in the chair. You reward responses as they get closer and closer to the desired behavior. They learn how to respond to differences in sound, color, or action. Okay? The discriminative stimulus in operant conditioning is a stimulus that elicits a response after associations with a reinforcement. Okay, so they're able to understand the difference between maybe a piece of candy you're going to get a reward from, but if I gave you a penny, maybe you wouldn't respond and you wouldn't do anything. Okay, it doesn't give you any type of behavior. Okay, so shaping a dog to play a piano using a method of successive approximations with food reward for each small step. Hopping up on the piano bench, you'd give him something. Putting his paws on the keys, you'd give him something. Making sound, you'd give him something. This dog would be taught to play the piano and now does so frequently because he thinks that if he plays the piano, he's going to get a treat. Okay, reinforcers strengthen the behavior. So on your sheet of paper, okay, I want you to draw an arrow going up next to reinforcement. Reinforcement is going to increase your behavior. It's going to make the behavior more prone to happen. You're going to do something. So if I give you a reinforcement, your behavior is going to increase. Right, increase, real big next to reinforcement. Okay, you have 2 different types of reinforcements. You have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Okay, positive. Right, I want you to put a plus next to positive reinforcement. A plus and an arrow going up. Okay, the plus is you're going to be given something. Giving something maybe potentially that you want to increase your behavior. So the definition I put here is following behavior with something pleasant to encourage your behavior. Okay, you got an A on your test. I want the behavior to increase. I'm going to give you a sticker for a job well done. Okay, you say thank you. I'm going to give you a high five. Okay, so something pleasurable. You're going to reward them with something to increase behavior. Okay, it doesn't always have to be good behavior. Okay, let's say I had a student in my class that kept raising his hand and go, ooh, 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 ooh. Okay, and I call on him. That's rewarding him. Okay, so the next time he has a question or a comment to add, what is he going to do? He's going to increase his behavior by going, ooh, 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 because he thinks I'm going to reward him by calling on him. Okay, so it's going to increase behavior. And the behavior that's increasing isn't always good, so keep that in mind. All right, negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, I want you to put a little minus here, and I want you to draw an arrow going up. Behavior is still going to increase, but the minus is you're taking something unpleasant away. Okay, so here, taking away something unpleasant to increase behavior. All right, so I want you guys to, maybe your behavior in class, to be very, I would say, mature and responsible. So I want that behavior to increase. Something that you hate maybe is tests. So if you increase good behavior and you're very well behaved, maybe I'll take away the test for you, something that's unpleasant. Okay, another example would be that I want you guys to score really well, okay, on your next test. If you all score really well in your next test, I will take away something unpleasant like the no cards. Okay, so negative reinforcement, you're still increasing behavior, right? And then you're taking something that you don't want away. All right, so here's another chart maybe you copy down in your notes. Okay, operant conditioning, you have the two different types of reinforcements, positive and negative reinforcement. Okay, positive reinforcement, you add a stimulus, right? Getting a hug, receiving a paycheck, those are both adding something. Negative reinforcement, you remove something. Okay, so fastening your seatbelt to turn off the beeping. The annoying sound is the beeping, so you're going to fasten your seatbelt. Okay, so you have two different types of reinforcers you can use. You can use primary reinforcers and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers, okay, are innately reinforcing stimuluses, such as things that satisfy our biological needs. Okay, our biological needs of hunger. They're going to satisfy our biological needs of sex. Okay, things themselves that are rewarding. The two big ones of our biological primary reinforcers here are hunger and sex. Okay, another primary reinforcer maybe would be something that maybe like warmth. Okay, that's another thing that's a primary reinforcer. Secondary reinforcers, often called conditioned reinforcers, is a stimulus that gains its reinforcing power through its association with a primary reinforcer. So things that you learn to value. Okay, things that you can learn to value, which could be a secondary reinforcer, are goods, okay, that you can get from people, money, cars, stickers, okay, new TVs. All of these are learned. We are learned as human beings to value. Okay, it's not something that's a biological need. Okay, money is a special secondary reinforcer. Praise is another secondary reinforcer. Great job. Okay. Toys. Alright, the next thing that we're going to spend some time looking at is how often should you be reinforcing individuals. Okay, so how often should you reinforce? Every time or just sometimes you see the behavior? With my AP Psych kids, do I need to reinforce you, give you points every single time I give you homework? Or can I just assume that you're doing the assignments? Versus maybe some of my freshmen, do I need to reinforce them and give them points every single time they do their homework? Okay, so you have two different kind of systems that are going to work here. You have the continuous and partial reinforcement. Okay, continuous reinforcement is to reinforce the behavior every time the behavior is exhibited. Every time you do your homework, I give you points. Every time that you do well on a test, I give you a sticker. Every time that you raise your hand, I compliment you. Okay, it's usually done when the subject is first learning to make the association. So when you're first kind of making the association between the two things, usually you want to start it off where in the beginning of the school year, I gave you points for every single assignment. So then you learned that you needed to do the assignments. Acquisition, the initial stages there, we saw that word with classical conditioning, comes really fast. Okay, you learn that if you're not going to get the points if you don't do the certain assignments. Extinction comes really quick too. Okay, so if I stop giving points, behavior is going to stop existing. Okay, partial intermittent schedules, okay, is you reinforce the behavior only some of the times that is it exhibited. Okay, acquisition comes on more slowly. So it would be as if I reward you maybe every 3 assignments, or I give you points for some assignments here or there. Okay, but is more resistant to extinction. Right? So it doesn't go extinct as early because maybe you start doing the behavior because you don't know when you're going to get the points. So your behavior increases gradually over time, and it's less willing to resist. There are 4 different types of partial reinforcement schedules, which we will take a look at. Okay, so the partial schedule can be done in two ways. Okay, you could either do it based on the ratio. You're going to reward them based upon maybe a certain amount. Okay, or you're going to reward them based on the time in which they exhibit it. So I kind of want to clarify these two words. Ratio, okay, are dependent on the behavior itself. You're watching or counting the behaviors. A certain number of times behaviors are needed before you're rewarded. Okay, so the third time you do your homework, okay, I will give you, or your third assignment, okay, I will give you points, or I will give you a sticker. Interval involves a time element. Okay, how much time will be given before a reward is given. Okay, so every 3 weeks, okay, I will assign a quiz and I will give you points. Okay, or it's existing every day or every Friday, the assignments are going to be rewarded. It's existing around a time element, not so much about how many behaviors you're exhibiting. So ratio, maybe you want to put a number sign, okay, and intervals is based on the time. Okay, so here's the ratio schedule. Okay, remember, ratio is the number of times the behavior it does exist. Okay, you have fixed now. Fixed is a set amount. Okay, provides a reinforcement after a set number of responses. After 10 A's, you will get rewarded. Okay, after 30 note cards, I will give you points. Okay, you get a manicure for every 5 pounds you lose. So you're being rewarded based upon the fixed ratio. Variable ratio, then, variable is it changes. Okay, you never know how many amounts that you're going to have to exhibit before you get rewarded. So provides a random reinforcement after random number of responses. So this is when fly fishers or slot machines. You don't know how many times you're actually going to have to stick your pole for fishing in and out of the water before you actually get a fish. Okay, so the example for fixed ratio would be every single time, okay, or every 3 times, okay, you pull your rod back and stick it into the water. Every 3rd time you pull out a fish. Right? For variable ratio, you're never knowing when it's going to take place. You never know how many pulls on the slot machine you have to have before money or before you will win. Right? It's very hard to get acquisition. Okay, it's very hard to make those initial beginning kind of connections, but it's also very hard to have extinction take place. You kind of get addicted because you never know. It's kind of like a surprise element. You never know when you're going to win. Okay. Interval schedule then works on the fixed and variable interval as well. Remember, interval is the time. Okay, so fixed time, fixed interval, requires a set amount of time elapsed before giving a reinforcement. So fixed interval could be every 5 days you get a manicure. Okay, you're rewarding yourself. All right, you're fixing it not so much on the poundage about how much you're losing, but you're doing it on the time that's occurring. Right, the mail schedule, you know that at every day you get a reward. With every day at 3 o'clock you get mail. Variable then is going to be a random time. You never know what time of day it's going to happen. Emails, you never know what time of day that's going to happen. Okay, it's requires a random amount of time to elapse before you're given a reinforcement. Okay, it's very hard to get acquisition, but again, it's very hard to have extinction take place. So if you take a look at the schedule, okay, the number of responses are listed all the way on the left side, and the time underneath it is listed on the bottom. Okay, intermittent reinforcing schedule. Skinner's laboratory pigeons produce these response patterns to each of the 4 reinforcement schedules. Reinforcements are indicated by diagonal marks. For people, as for pigeons, reinforcements linked to the number of responses or ratio schedule produce a higher response rate than reinforcements linked to the time elapsed or the interval schedule. Okay, so ratio schedule usually produce a higher response rate versus the time. So the number in which the behaviors are actually exhibited usually has people respond more than actually how long it goes. But the predictability of rewarding also matters. Unpredictability, the variability, schedule produces more consistent responding than predictive fixed does. Okay, so fixed ratio here, okay, if you take a look at how quickly they are reinforced, fixed ratio has a lot of responses very quickly. Okay, variable ratio then has a lot of responses in a little bit more of time. Okay, then you have the next one is fixed interval. Okay, it takes a longer time to get the same amount or to get, if anything, similar to the responses. It takes longer. Versus variable interval, right? It's steadily responding, right? But it does take a longer time in order to have that association take place. Door-to-door salespeople are reinforced by which schedule? Okay, so kind of thinking about a door-to-door salesperson, all right? You never know how many doors you're going to have to go to before you actually sell something. Okay, so that would be a variable ratio. Okay, people checking the oven to see if the cookies are done are on which schedule? Okay, usually you know within 10 minutes those cookies will be done. So that's usually something that's set. So it's fixed and then it's a time interval. Okay, airline frequent flyer program that offers a free flight after every 2,000 miles in which you travel. Okay, it's something that's set, so it's every 2,000, and it's not giving you a time, it's giving you a number, so that would be ratio. Alright, so you might want to copy this down again, the difference between fixed ratio, fixed interval, okay, variable ratio, and variable interval. And again, we will go over this in class, but you might want to make sure this chart is listed in your notes. Punishment. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about reinforcements. Punishments decrease behavior, okay, or make it less likely to occur. So you want to get rid of the behavior. Okay, maybe crying, okay, maybe giving a spanking. Okay, there's two different types of punishments that you could have. Right, you could have a positive punishment, or you could have a negative punishment. Positive punishment, okay, put a little plus next to it. Okay, positive is you're going to give them something, and then draw a little arrow going down next to positive punishment by decreasing behavior. Okay, so they get something to decrease it. So an example here would be, all right, you are getting something, a fine, to decrease behavior. An unpleasant consequence, another unpleasant consequence. Be a ticket to decrease the speeding. All right, a negative punishment is withholding something pleasurable from them. Okay, so a negative punishment, I want you to put a little minus sign because you're taking something away, and then I want you to draw an arrow going down to decrease behavior. So an example of this may be, all right, in order for you to decrease the amount of minutes you're spending on your cell phone, decrease the behavior, I'm going to withhold something that you want, which is your phone. Which one is usually more severe? The negative punishment, because they're withholding something from you. All right, so the first time, let's say you speed, you get that positive punishment, you get the ticket. The second time, the negative punishment, they might withhold your license. Punishment works best when it's immediately done after the behavior, and if it is harsh, is what they state. Okay, so as we learned with classical conditioning, the 5 different terms, acquisition, extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, and discrimination, they work for operant conditioning as well. Okay, acquisition is that first time you pair that behavior with the punishment, or you pair the behavior, okay, with the reinforcement, and it's when somebody initially understands the association between the two. Oh, you're linking that every time I get an A, I get a sticker. Okay, extinction. If you stop over time giving the points, okay, for the homework assignment, over time, the behavior might stop. Okay, they might stop doing the homework because they're no longer getting a reward. Spontaneous recovery is where you spontaneously respond to it even though you haven't been given maybe a reward for the behavior. Okay, you're spontaneously just going to react to doing it even though you're not getting rewarded and kind of feeling like, oh wow, I can't believe I did that. Generalization. Generalization is where you see similar items, okay, as a reward. So maybe it doesn't matter to you if you get 5 points, 10 points, or a lollipop. You kind of still generalize that you're getting something. Okay, maybe something in terms of the 5 points, 10 points, 20 points. They're still points, so you're going to do it. Okay, maybe you're getting a lollipop or a Starburst or maybe another piece of candy. So it doesn't matter to you what it is. You're still going to do the behavior. Discrimination is when maybe you're only going to respond to something because you only want to respond to, or you're able to discriminate, like, I'm not going to do my homework if it's just worth 5 points. I'll do the homework assignments that are really worth 30 points because they're worth more points. Okay, so Skinner today, extending Skinner's understanding in terms of the cognitive perspective. So we know that Skinner is a behaviorist. However, if you want to connect him to the cognitive perspective, he believes, until the day he died, he believed strongly that there was no connection between memory, okay, and his approach. Skinner does not believe, or did not believe, that there's any connection between the cognitive science and operant conditioning. He was purely a behaviorist. However, several studies have made a connection today to the cognitive perspective. Okay, how it's connected. Okay, Edward Tolman looked at learning in terms of rats. Okay, he put rats in a maze. Okay, without food. Okay, at the end, the rats would make no connection to the maze, and it was as if they were going through the maze as if they were sightseeing, strolling through the maze, taking their time. Okay, not really exhibiting a fast behavior. However, when food was added at the end, the rats would run as if they had memorized the maze, creating a cognitive map. When they knew that there was food at the end, the first time they saw the food, they were like, wow. The next time they went through the maze, they were like, well, maybe there's food at the end. So they started actually creating what they believe a cognitive map that there must be food at the end, or reward at the end of this maze. Hence creating a mental representation of the layout of one's environment. This is known as latent learning. Learning that occurs but is not apparent until there is an incentive that demonstrates it. Okay, this is all known as latent learning, which hence there's a connection to memory because you're remembering that you're getting a reward. Two different things popped up in terms of the rewards. Some of the rewards that they saw were purely intrinsic motivation. Some rewards are a desire to perform a behavior for its own sake. Okay, I'm taking AP Psych for my own good. I want to learn. I want to become a better person. Some, however, are extrinsic motivation, a desire to perform a behavior to receive a promised reward or to avoid a consequence. So maybe you're just taking AP Psych because you want the credit, okay, or you want the money in the end. You're not doing for your own good, which is intrinsic motivation. You're doing it more for the extrinsic motivational factor. Okay, Skinner also has a legacy in terms of impacting schools. Okay, he's also impacted sports. He's impacted the work environment, home environment, and he also has made some improvements for self-improvement. And we will look more at these in class. Okay, so something that we're not going to have a ton of class time to talk about due to time restraints is the difference between classical and operant conditioning, and you need to be able to identify the difference between the two. Both classical and operant conditioning are forms of associative learning. Okay, so they're both where you connect something with a behavior. Both involve acquisition, extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, and discrimination. The similarities are sufficient to make some researchers wonder if a single stimulus response learning process might explain them both. Their difference, though, classical conditioning is when an organism associates different stimuli that is not controlled and responds automatically, causes reflexes, and through operant conditioning, an organism associates its operant behaviors. Those act on the environment to produce rewarding or punishing stimuli with their consequences. Okay, so operant conditioning works more on whether or not you're rewarded or punished. Okay, and classical conditioning is based more on how are your reflexes going to be learned. Okay. Here again, the similarities for classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Both have association ways of learning, and both have the vocabulary which you should be confident now in: extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, acquisition, and discrimination. The difference is when classical conditioning and operant conditioning for them is classical conditioning is when an organism is learning associations between events it does not control, so like I said, their reflexes. And operant conditioning is when an organism learns association between its behavior and its resulting events, so the punishments and rewards. Okay, so here's kind of a table that lists the difference between classical and operant conditioning. It might be helpful for you to copy it down and to look over it.